Hello. For the sake of confidentiality, I'm going to refer to my supervisor today as Penny. Penny is the head of the middle school at Duke School, where I teach, of course, and that's roughly an equivalent position to an assistant principal. So she's responsible for uh, reporting directly to the head of school, working with other supervisory directors and offices, and supervising middle school teachers. And in my short teaching career, she's easily the hardest working supervisor I've ever had. Part of what makes her a really good leader is that she's able to adopt different leadership styles based on the appropriate situation. Um, and I think that's just a common thing among all good leaders. But if I had to boil her leadership style down to something like specific, I would say that she's mostly a transformational and democratic leader. Um, this is because she's always asking for teacher input, and she's always communicating with other administrators and with other directors in order to make decisions and policy changes and things like that, which is kind of the defining element of both of those styles. Um, the best example I can think of this is the implementation of something called prime time at my school. It's going to start next school year, in fact. Uh, for a long time, Duke schools had an issue with accountability for students during after school programming. And that's because there are so many after school programs that we offer, all with their own unique individual schedules, that sometimes it's hard to know where kids are supposed to be at what time. And that becomes, a safety issue. We offer after school activities such as, all kinds of performing arts ensembles, sports, Model UN, and then in addition to all that, just regular after school care. And it's also a monetary issue because Duke School is a private school, so all kids pay tuition to go there, and there is an extra fee for after school care. So the issue will arise where a kid may audition for a part in the musical, and if they earn the part, then essentially they're getting free after school care on the days they have musical rehearsal. Whereas a kid who doesn't get a part, uh, if they need after school care, they have to pay for it. And we all know different families have different needs. A parent may or may not be able to pick up their child. That being said, Penny came up with the idea of prime time, and it's basically an extension of the school day with its own individual blocks to fit those after school activities. It has a budget for extra after school staff to supervise students and offer even more activities, and a completely new sign-in system that works via apps. And what's what's really good about that is, again, it solves the accountability issue. Uh, it's a lot more organized, and it fixes the money issue as well because that all of that budget is a result of prorated tuition across all middle school students, regardless of their after school status. So kids who weren't paying for after school before will have a little bit higher tuition. However, kids who were paying for after school before, and that was the mass majority of them, they have a slightly smaller tuition. So it's kind of like we all pay a little more, but we all get a lot more out of it. And she came up with that by having to, assess the needs of teachers, students, parents, the community, and then working with the business office and development office and seeing how that fits in the big picture of the school's vision and things like that. So that's definitely an example of transformational and democratic leadership. Um, As far as how she spends her time, most days I actually don't interact with Penny outside of, a regular hello, unless I'm getting a routine observation or meetings or things like that. But I can make an educated guess to how she spends her time in regards to a lot of these activities. I would say she spends about 15 to 20% of her time developing curriculum. And I think that's an appropriate amount of time, especially given that Duke School has a full-time curriculum director. Penny meets with this person, I would guess, based on just passing by in her office, I would guess about 2 to 6 times per month, and more times when we are closer to the beginning and ends of quarters, and coinciding with grade level project culminations, which is kind of our version of exams. And then also teachers are always a part of those meetings. I'm always seeing teachers in those meetings with the curriculum director and Penny herself. So I know that there is teacher input in those things. Also, at the end of every school year, all the teachers get a curriculum binder. It's really hefty. It's about that thick. And it's got an overview of what students are learning in Duke School across all subject areas. What I particularly like about the curriculum binder is that it's, like I just said, all subject areas. So even though I'm stuck, in the band room, I can just go to my binder and I can flip through and kind of figure out what sixth graders are doing in social studies right now. And for all I know, it could be something that's very relevant to what I'm teaching. And that kind of ties into Duke School's philosophy of, I guess the word is not cross-cultural, or, education that goes across different disciplines, different subject areas, cross-curricular. I would say that she spends a very little amount of time staffing for instruction. I put 5 to 10%, and that's because that's on a need basis. If there's if a lot of teachers are leaving and they have to be replaced, then of course she has to spend more time doing that. But if not, then you don't. One thing I like is what you're going to learn is a reoccurring theme with Penny, is that she always asks for teacher input for staffing. An example of this is just this year. We're hiring a new Spanish teacher for next year. So she went around to all the grade levels and the specials team and asked them what their needs were from a Spanish teacher, specifically regarding scheduling. Because we all design our own schedules, basically. So we could say something like 8th grade wants to do X, Y, and Z, so they really need to have 8th graders go to Spanish in the mornings on these days. So she could kind of come up with a preliminary schedule and then go over that schedule while she's interviewing candidates. So the teacher's needs are already kind of being put into play there. Let's see. I would say she spends about 10 to 20% of her time organizing for instruction. Most of this probably has to do with scheduling. Kind of ties into what I was just talking about. The reason this takes so much time is because she has to allocate for the needs of all teachers. Everybody's teaching, everybody has a class, and everybody needs teaching time. And everybody needs planning time. And, we have to account for things like transitions, teacher duties, like recess and lunch duties, and things like that. One thing I really like that she does is she tries to make sure that there's at least one duty-free lunch and recess a week for all teachers. She does this actually by recruiting parent volunteers. So she's very busy with scheduling. As far as facilities, not so much. We have a facilities department at Duke School, and they actually work closely with teachers. So when we have tasks or issues regarding facilities, we can address it ourselves. We can put in requests and talk to the facilities employees and things like that. She only really interacts with them for big picture issues or big changes to the buildings. I think that professional development is probably one of the most important things to Penny. She's said this herself on multiple occasions, and she's demonstrated it. There's a large number of teacher work days that are allocated throughout the year at Duke School for professional development. And a lot of these she designs and conducts herself, sometimes alongside the curriculum curriculum director, or alongside other teachers. And when she doesn't, she hires outside talent to do it, or gets other teachers to lead it. She also oversees a budget for professional development for individual teachers. We're able to basically fill out a form and ask to do outside professional development when we need it. And it's almost always approved. So if approved, Duke School will pay to send us to professional development. They'll pay for lodging, travel, and even give us a food allowance, cover our substitutes and things like that. I've used it personally to go to NCMEA conference. Let's see. As far as support services go, the only responsibility she has, to my knowledge, is covering childcare for teachers during teacher work days. So, for example, we have some kind of teacher work day that's on a holiday where the children of the teachers working at Duke School are not going to their own school, or if they're Duke School students themselves, school's out, they need to be watched. What she usually does is just develops a schedule where teachers can rotate supervising children. That way, nobody's having to pay out of pocket for a babysitter or something like that, and there's still plenty of time for teachers to get things done during those teacher work days. So yeah, the reoccurring theme with Penny is that she has a big value for teacher input, and she's really open to collaborating with other administrators and with other offices. And I think at its core, that's what makes her a really effective, transformational, and democratic leader. From working alongside her and from what I've learned in this course, I've synthesized that what I believe is the most important skills for a leader to develop are the ability to communicate effectively, the ability to develop a vision and implement it, willingness to listen and consider the needs of others, organization skills, and a firm commitment to one's personal values. I think that those are all skills that have to be practiced, and that's, I think, typically why administrators and school leaders are people who have experience. That's one of those are skills that I think are really hard to just read about it and know it. You have to practice it and develop it. And I do think that if you develop those skills, then it's a lot easier to develop the competencies that are specific to the job, such as developing program curriculum and facilitating and advising individual professional development plans for teachers, increasing the availability of learning resources for the school, and things like that. So thank you for listening.